Welcome, everybody. We're starting to record, and I want to take a moment to recognize that the land and that this building is on and the places that this university has used to live and work in is the occupied territory of the Kalapuya people. With today's gathering, the work we do here daily, we acknowledge our occupation and pay respect to the Kalapuya people and the Confederate tribes of the Grand Ronde as the past, present, and future stewards of the land. My name's Jack Snell Ryan. I'm a professor working in the curricular area of Core Studio, which is a curricular area rooted in exploring dimensional iterations and interdisciplinarity. Our curricular model certainly echoes in many aspects of our visiting artist practice. Naama Tsabar practices and fuses elements from sculpture, music, performance, and architecture. Her interactive works expose hidden spaces and systems, reconceive gender narratives, shifting the viewer experience. Collaborating with local communities of female-identifying and gender non-conforming performers, Tsabar writes a new feminist and queer history of fluency. Naama lives and works in New York City, receiving her MFA from Columbia University in 2010. Solo exhibitions and performances, kind of abbreviated, have been presented at the Guggenheim in New York, the Museum of Art and Design in New York, the High Line, as well as solo shows in Switzerland, Paris, Tel Aviv, El Salvador, Buenos Aires, Freeze projects, Casman, New York, also showing in Guadalajara and Miami and Los Angeles. And then there's a huge list also of group exhibitions, including the Andy Warhol Museum, the Jewish Museum of Belgium, Ballroom Marfa, Frankfurt, Greater New York in 2010, which is a MoMA PS1 institution. And then featured in Art Forum, Art in America, Art Review, the New York Times, Freeze, and many others. And Tsabar's work is held in the permanent collections of the Los Angeles County Museum of Art, the Guggenheim, the Seattle Art Museum, San Francisco Museum of Modern Art, Tel Aviv Museum, the Pompidou, and many other significant public and private collections. Thank you. Please help me welcome Naama Tsabar.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I put together today a lecture around my work, and I decided to go in a more chronological fashion, starting from projects that I did just off my undergrad. So just a bit more about me. I was born in Israel. Finished my undergrad in 2004, started exhibiting and showing right away. And then 2008, I left Israel for New York. I went to Columbia, as Jack said, and I've been in New York ever since. And I'm just gonna jump right into it. So I'm gonna start with a project called Encore, which means more in French. And this project is an important one for me. It's from 2006. It's one of the first projects I did right off undergrad. And I use in it a core material that still appears in my work, which is the gaffer's tape. Gaffer's tape, for those who are not familiar with the material, is a kind of backstage labor material used to stabilize cords on stage. It's black to disappear into the stage and not be seen. And it's also used in a lot of film production, etc. With this work with Encore, I had a whole stage set up in my studio, ready to be played, performed on. So drums, guitars, monitors, all of it. And I went and started stabilizing the cables. And I went with the action of stabilization more and more and more until it cocooned the whole stage. And what you see here is basically a shell that I made out of the shapes that came about from cocooning the stage, and is made out of gaffer's tape. And it's hanging from the ceiling. It looks heavy, it looks like dense, but it's actually hollow. And I wouldn't call it light, but it's not taking the old ceiling down. And for me, with this work, was kind of like the first steps in thinking about the material and the place of the material, and taking a material that's kind of like from labor, from backstage, a material that's a facilitator, a utilitarian material, and using it to create something that is the show itself, basically. So you're looking in the material is representing the show, and of course thinking about the way it catches light, and the forms sculptural forms that it creates from kind of closing spaces and opening others. This work is called Cave of Swimmers, November 7, 2013. Continuing with the gaffer's tape, that's a body of work that I did that are reliefs. So the name of the work is the name of the band that performed that evening that I did a relief of. And what you see here is their cable formation on stage. And so the minute they got off stage, I went on stage, I stabilized all the cables. I pre-prepared kind of a flooring underneath them that I can then roll up and take to my studio and make this relief of the stage. And then, of course, the date is the date they performed. And for me, these works are kind of almost like documents of a moment in time, trying to capture a live moment. The size of the work is the size of the stage. And then, of course, the cable formation is in relation to where the musician stood, how many effects they had, et cetera. So there's a lot of things that I'm not in control in with this work. What I am in control of is the first thing, which maybe is the most primary thing that every kid that starts to listen to music is in control of, especially when we used to go to stores to buy CDs and vinyls, is like just going and buying and choosing the band, right? So I chose the band, Cave of Swimmers. By the way, it's a Venezuelan-based band that's now currently based in Miami. And this was done in like a dive bar in Miami. And then the other thing that I have control over is how do I lay the gaffer's tape, right? That's a formal decision. So do I go straight? Do I go to the sides with it? So the start and the finish are something I can control to an extent, but everything in between it, the size of the stage, the formation that it takes is not up to me. This is another work from the same series. It's called Laila, February 23rd, 2014. And you see it's a bit of a bigger stage. And it's surprising how a floor that doesn't look big, like you go to a dive bar and you see in a small stage, how it translates to something that is on the wall and how much space that actually takes. So taking the floor onto the wall. This work is called Sweat. It's a work from 2010. This is specifically from the Tel Aviv Museum. But I should say this was also in the same year that I showed it in the museum in Tel Aviv. I also finished my graduate MFA at Columbia, and it's also the same project I showed from my thesis show. So a bit about my background that I haven't mentioned is that I was a bartender for most of my 20s. I worked in Tel Aviv nightlife. I used to go to work at 8 p.m., open the bar, and then get out of work around 7 a.m. And so my entire night was completely made out of artificial lighting. I didn't really have a night. I slept during the day, and I was very inserted into that whole scene. With this work, which is very intense, it's and obviously alcohol is a major factor in it to make it work and make these capsules, these urban capsules, these nocturnal urban capsules hold like really intense experiences for the people that go there. So with this work, there's 3 elements to it. The more sculptural element is these overextended bar shelves that are shiny black. There's bed sheets, and then full liquor bottles. Each bed sheet on its end has the same kind of liquor, and it's stuffed into that liquor bottle like you would think of a Molotov cocktail. And so each bed sheet holds the same kind of liquor bottle, and then through holes in the shelves, the bed sheets travel inside the hidden space in the shelves and connect the 2 similar types of liquors together. So you can kind of see like the Southern Comfort here, and there is one bed sheet that's just traveling in this hidden space inside the shelves. I should also mention that for the Tel Aviv show, since I had such a acquaintance with the scene at the time, this was 2010, there's an extra element to this work where all the bottles were sponsored by local bars. So each bar sponsored 2 bottles of the same kind. And there were 80 bottles, so 40 bars. And so the sponsor list for the work was also kind of like a nocturnal map of the city itself and the institutions that worked within those hours in the city. The way this, I like to explain this work is as a durational installation. And so, you have sheets that are fabric stuffed into bottles. And of course, the sheets start absorbing the alcohol and the liquids. The shelves that look really like sexy and like black are actually made of MDF that does not live well with liquids. And so once the liquid from the sheets gets to the shelves, it starts bowing and opening up the seams and kind of revealing the interiors of the shelves and this maze of bed sheets. By the end of the exhibition, it's a mess. Everything is falling apart and kind of like really swelled, and you can kind of see the inside of the shelves. For me in this work, I was interested in kind of like thinking about the hidden spaces, the spaces that are there and kind of how they open up through the duration of the exhibition, the smell of alcohol that was in the air the whole time that they were the sheets were absorbing, but also thinking about these kind of like radical places of intimacy that are kind of fueled by consumption of alcohol and music, and thinking about the domestic, the bed sheets, the bedroom, thinking about the marriage of those 2 together, and also thinking about liquor bottles that are meant to be consumed, to be enjoyed, to get intoxicated with, and the Molotov cocktail that is a means of DIY way of resistance that we just saw in Ukraine, most recently being employed with like vodka distilleries making Molotov cocktails. And both the liquor bottles and the Molotov bottles are not employed here. They're like in a closed system that kind of like wastes its own self. This work is from the same years. It's untitled, and it's made from anti-fatigue floor mats. Anybody that has worked in the service industry has a real hatred for this material. It's what lines the bars and kitchens. It's the thing that you're supposed to stand on for 11 hours and feel that take the weight of your body. But it's also the last thing it's the first thing you take into the bar at the start of the shift, and the last thing you take out of the bar at the end of the shift with all, the liquids of the night that has been kind of spilled onto it, and you need to hose it down. And in a way, it frames a night. And I was interested at the time with creating a kind of like this industrial earthwork from this material. I'm interested, if you already saw, in materials like in gaffers and the alcohol bottles, like the mats, these materials that are kind of at the service of an experience, right? That are hidden, but are essential to it for its functioning. And so here, I created this kind of like wave-like form that was the shape of the bar I worked at the time. It's just like instead of the mats going into the bar, they're going out, and they just hit the wall, and that's where they stop. But this work is a work that you're allowed to walk on. This material can really bear a lot, and you can do whatever you want to it, really, and it's still fine. And it was really interesting to see what the material did to the viewers, and so it kind of divided the viewers into two. One half recognized this material from service industry, from their background, and did not have any problem walking on it, sitting on it, interacting with it. And then the other half of the viewers did not recognize it and had still the aura of the art object around it. So they viewed it more as a formal, minimalist kind of, industrial earthwork of sorts. And they would, if I paid them money, they wouldn't go on it and walk on it. And so it was an interesting kind of like split that it kind of imposed on the viewer. That was a surprise. And it's interesting to think how a material can do that. Around the same year as just before leaving Tel Aviv, 2008, I recorded a video art called Untitled Babies that then, since 2010, I've been doing as a live performance. Probably maybe have one more of those in me. And it's also the start off of my interest in rethinking the guitar, the place of the guitar. I myself have a musical background. I play guitar and piano. And with this work, this specifically is from the live performance. This is in Warsaw, in Poland. In every place I perform it, I put together a female band. We learn one song. It's the song Babies by the band Pulp, which was a big hit when I was growing up in Israel. And it's sung by Jarvis Cocker, which is kind of this flamboyant singer. And the lyrics of the songs are like, I want to take you home, I want to give you children, yes, you might be my girlfriend, yeah. So it's very kind of like this adolescence fantasy, an easy one, a very gendered one too. And of course, I'm singing it. It kind of has this transformation. It's almost like a drag act. That's how I view it. And then, the height of the song, I take the guitar off and I start beating it against the stage. This cliche rock and roll moment. And I beat it and I beat it. The only thing is it's a guitar that I enhanced with carbon fiber. And I cut a piece off of it and put solid aluminum onto it, so it's unbreakable. You can't break it. And so this kind of cathartic moment of the break doesn't happen and becomes this durational exhaustion act where the stage beneath me starts breaking. And it goes on and on until I literally drop from exhaustion. And when this work was in a video art, as a video art, I was more thinking about it as kind of the aesthetics of a video clip, and that the first half of the video was like that, cuts, fast cuts, rhythmic. And then when I start breaking the stage or trying to break the guitar, it turns into a one shot that is more associated with documentation of the 70s durational exhaustion acts of like performance and body performance. And with the live performance of it, it's really all about my body and how much it can withstand. I tell the band, just jam until I drop. And it's the longest performance I've had was 40 minutes. And I couldn't take my clothes off for a week afterwards. I couldn't take my arms up. It's really an assault on the body. But for me, you know, it was interesting taking apart the stage, the kind of the ground we stand on, and opening a place for questions, rethinking things. The guitar is still good, still plays. Just needs tuning every once in a while. And continue with the idea of the floor. This is a project I was commissioned to do by Freeze Project. Freeze Project, at the time, it's no longer there since COVID. But at the time, Freeze Project New York was on Randall's Island. It's a park in the way that Freeze always does, also in London. It's a big tent that's constructed for the fair in the park. I don't know who has been to an art fair here and hasn't, but just a bit of background, really, really basic, is that the art fair is a place for art commerce. It's not about content, and it's not about, you know, it's not a show, it's not a gallery show. It's a place to sell work and where collectors go to buy work. And it's predominantly still, this is from 2014, this project, but it's predominantly selling cis men art in the art fair. So in 2014, I was commissioned. They gave me a booth in the art fair, which is the most expensive real estate at that point on the island. This booth. And what I did is you know, because it's built in a park and it's built as a tent, they had to raise the whole art fair, so it sits on like these stilts that have like wooden boards on them. So what I did is like I cut out the booth floor, exposing the park itself inside the tent, the grass. And then I took that floor, and the way it was really built like you would have for a music festival. So I took the floor of the booth and put it just outside the Freeze Art Fair tent, and I curated a music festival on it, on the floor of the booth. And the music festival, I should say that this project is called Without. The music festival was a whole question, like how do you create a music festival? I've never done that. I don't know. So I invited my friend Mindy Abovich. Mindy Abovich is the founder and editor of Tom Tom magazine, which sadly no longer exists, but for many years it did, for 10 years, and it is the only magazine in the world that's dedicated to female and trans drummers, which is such a manly position within the instrumental world. And so I knew with Mindy we were gonna create a feminist festival. But what we decided together that the one thing that runs through all the bands, there were 14 bands in the festival, through all the bands is they all have a female beat maker. And so by that, we really had a majority of women, because if you're going to give up as a band, like your position of drumming to a female position, then you're already probably all female or mostly female, because it's really unorthodox, especially then. And this festival was free outside the tent. Going into the main tent to see art cost about $40. This was free content outside that was feminist and exhibited mostly women. And it was a complete reversal of what was happening inside the art fair tent. So, if you gathered by now, I'm very interested in architecture. And this is actually a work from, I first did in El Salvador, in their museum, Marta. This work is basically what you see here is a big hall in a museum. It's a wall. The lower part of the wall, the gray part, has 60 piano strings on it. And kind of like rectangular holes that you see, well, rectangular shapes, black ones, those are holes, sound holes for those strings. And then all these wires running are the system that is amplifying the instrument that is on the bottom part. So there's a mixer, there's some DIs, and then that goes into like these mini amplifiers that then send the signal up to a set of speakers. But the speakers are inverted, and so they're throwing the sound into the wall, into the architecture of the museum. And all the lines you see are basically the cables, the wires connecting the tweeter to the mid, to the crossover, et cetera, et cetera. So this is a work that's, and this is just a moment inside the instrument. For me, this work was really an interesting lesson in DIY. How do you build an instrument? So a lot of YouTube hours went into this. This is from 2015. This was also exhibited in the Museum of Art and Design in New York in 2000, maybe 19 or 8, I don't remember, 18. But the interesting thing for me here is specifically also the context of El Salvador, a place that has a lot of, the people are really, as a woman you're not allowed to walk on the street after a certain hour. It's not necessarily the safest place to be, so you don't have a lot of a voice necessarily as an artist or an individual. And with this work, it was interactive, so the viewers could touch it, and when they strum the strings, the piano, 60 piano strings, when they strum the strings, the sound that the string made was amplified through this system and outputted back into the museum walls themselves, reverberating, and what you heard outside was basically what was translated through all the frequencies that the walls, the architecture kind of ate, that reduced. And so for me, in a fantastic way, I was thinking about it as in a way to be heard, to play the actual, as a viewer, to actually have, to be heard and to be participating, and to have your action having a reaction that actually reverberates through the museum walls themselves. So kind of like this fantastic, kind of like more romantic idea. And of course also, I was really interested in just having the whole system it's representing itself visually. So it's also about kind of like, leaving the system exposed, so there's nothing hidden, actually. So you can see how everything flows. This work is called Propagation, Opus 3. Continuing with the architecture and museums, this is called Closer. This is actually an image from my show in the Guggenheim, and this work was made for that show. And as you see, it's just a freestanding corner, supporting only itself. When you walked into the space, you saw this corner and these microphones penetrating it. And then when you walk around the corner, you saw that the corner had holes in it. Looking a bit closer, you could see like a guitar tuner. And the inside of it was like lush red, like you would have the outside of an instrument look. And this work is, I think about it as a singer-songwriter corner. So the right side, the right wall, has an inverted string instrument inside, like a guitar neck that I built, so you can actually play it and strum it. And the left side, that's fashioned a bit like old microphones, had, well, it was an acoustic space you can sing into, and they were both acoustic spaces. And so once you were inside the corner, facing the corner, penetrating the wall, whether with your voice or with your limbs playing the strings, the sound was picked up by these microphones on the other end that were embedded inside the wall. And so everything you did in this highly intimate moment was outputted through a set of speakers that faced another direction. And so it was at once a very intimate, personal space and a very performative space. And I found that duality to be interesting. And this is, I have a segment from a performance, so for the Guggenheim and then for other occasions as well, working with Fielded as a vocalist from New York that I've been working with for almost 10 years. We composed a piece for Closer. So every time it's exhibited and a performance is needed, we fly over and she performs it. But of course, just like the propagation opus 3, this work is interactive, and so it's always on. As a viewer, you could explore it yourself and touch it and make your own composition out of it. So this is a short segment. A moment. Continuation of my what I call my guitar series that started with Untitled Babies. This sculpture is 2 guitars, a left-handed guitar and a right-handed guitar, that I fused together at their backs. So creating a new instrument that has 2 faces. The work is also actually called Double Face or Untitled Double Face. And while it's enough, it implies its use. It's a work that I also perform on with another musician, a left-handed guitar player that she plays left and I play right. And the thing that this object does as an instrument when we perform on it is it imposes this hyper-intimate relationship between the 2 musicians, because you're basically holding it between you and you're playing the guitar that is right up against the other musician's body. And so it's a complete negotiation between movement and sound. And so as much as it is like a sound piece when we play it, it's also a sort of choreography or a dance. And I view it, this work, as a relationship piece. It's about finding ground that you can work with another person. And this is, there's a video of this work that's called Stranger, that's like a half documentation but standalone video. We also perform this. And at occasions. And I have a short segment from the video from a moment. It's a 20-minute video. So, you know, it's a negotiation. It's tender at times and violent at others. And it's also interesting sonically, this instrument, because it's two guitars put together, so it's wood, which means it's resonating from side to side. And so sonically, there's a lot of overtones and kind of like playing one side silent and having it come out, the pickups of the other side. And the other thing that I'm really happy with this work is that we started exhibiting it and performing it in art venues, but soon enough, like, we also performed it in music festivals on the floor with people around us. And that's really interesting crossover to see, like, what the viewers, the audience, pick up from each performance and what's important to them. Yeah. And this is kind of continuing with the guitar. This is an ongoing series of mine. It's called Composition. The specific image is from the High Line. It shows kind of the main image in the work. It's a musician that's playing through an amplifier while standing on it. And so the amplifier doubling as a plinth, but also outputting the musician's sound. The composition, this is composition 20. There's composition 24, there's composition 21. The difference between these compositions is the number, and the number is the number of musicians that are part of the work that perform. I perform this in different locations, and every time I work in a specific city, I work only with local musicians. I first commission from usually three local musicians, new musical compositions. They can write whatever they want, but it has to fall, all three compositions have to fall within the same musical structure, so the same 4 chords have to be used. The same BPM, beats per minute, tempo has to be used, or halftime, but yeah. And the singing, the melody has to sit on the same musical scale. I usually get very different songs back. And then I form these bands, these local bands. It's all female identifying, gender non-conforming musicians. It's always in an outside area where it's performed, and it's this, for me it was this idea, but of like, you know, the sculpture outside, which is interesting, and especially within European and American contemporary, but also history of like who stands on plinths in parks in public areas. This specific performance was in New Orleans. And also, you know, this work kind of like thinking about kind of connecting the history of the living sculpture. If we think of Gilbert and George and their living sculpture, or Felix Gonzalez Torres, the go-go dancer, the place of the plinth is like raising something to a sculptural essence. So I have 3 different compositions. I put 3 bands together. Each band learns 1 song. And as you see, each musician is facing out. There's no centralized PA. So when you go to a show, there's a centralized PA that goes for a mixer, and then all the sounds come out of this PA. Here, the sound is localized. So the sound is where the amplifier is. And so for composition 21 in New Orleans, we had 21 sound sources scattered outside. Specifically, every composition takes a different form. Composition 21 was a triangle. Yes, that is a triangle. You see here, there's like B1, B2, B3. Those are the bands. They're facing outwards. And then there's T's. Those are tremolo parts. And there's like tremolo parts are connecting parts. Musicians that play this non-rhythmic, atmospheric tremolo between songs. And so the way the composition works is band 1 plays their song. All the audience goes and stands in front of band number 1 to see the song. Then there's tremolo, go into band number 2. All the audience moves and stand in front of band number 2, and then the same with band number 3. So each one plays their song, and there's like a rotation like you would do for like a classical sculpture, like 360 degrees, because people want to see things frontal. And then at a certain point, all the bands get like the same time and start playing at the same time, the 3 different songs. At that point, there's no hierarchy. You can't stand in one place and listen to everything. And so it becomes like a fragmented field of sound, where because all the 3 songs are of the same kind of musical structure, you can walk with your body in between the bands and kind of make like unique mixes. You can hear the singer from one band and a singer from the other band, but they're like kind of like correlating and doing like backup vocals for each other, and the drums from a third band and the bass from the second band. And it makes these very like physical, unique mixing through the movement of your body, but it also makes for a very democratic viewing experience where you are in charge of your own experience and what you see and what you hear. And this is to illustrate, this is when the bands are playing, and this is when everybody's playing. And you can see how the structure, the triangular structure, is just completely dissolved by the audience itself. And I actually have really short snippets from New Orleans, one of each song, and then everybody playing together. It's filmed with my iPhone, so please excuse me, but I think it tells the story well. This song was written by Keith Slaughter, which also sings it. This is a song written by Helen Gillet, and it's in French. And this is a song written by Mashia Lake, also the singer. And this is everybody playing together, me just moving with my iPhone through this composition. And a snippet out of the tremolo part that's really more atmospheric. And everybody plays together. So just before I move to the next project, just to say I could talk forever about that piece, but part of the work, of course, is the experience and, you know, surfacing and putting a certain demographic and people in front. But it's also much about the local community. So I think like of the musicians are almost like ready-mades, you know, if you will. They're there. I don't do anything really. All I do is bring them all into one space and commission these songs. But it's a community that's already there. And the work is not about only the end product, but also the process of it and showing its own community what's already there. So it's really just like taking the attention and putting it so they see each other. And the nice thing that happens with these works, with the composition works, is that many times afterwards, these musicians form their own bands that are all like female identifying and gender non-conforming, kind of like works and sees each other as a community. And for me, that's the big accomplishment. Moving to a body of work that I've started in 2012, it's called Work on Felt. The first ones were floor pieces. They're felt, but inside there is I insert carbon fiber and epoxy, and so while it looks like felt, which is like a fabric, it has the ability to retain a lot of tension because of the carbon fiber, and so it looks like one material but acts like a hybrid material. And with these works start off flat, like slabs. And with a tuner and a piano strings, I sculpt them. So the piano strings shape the work, but the work also puts tension on the piano string, and that gives the string its pitch. And so you can play these works. They have contact mics on them. These are some wall pieces from the same body of work. And so these works, when they're installed, they're always hooked up to a guitar amplifier, and the viewers can interact with them. And there's several variations of them. Every variation is a different form. and it opens up in relation to the string. Each one is a different pitch in relation to the form that it takes. And when I show groupings of them, I usually come together with local musicians, and we compose through a 7-day rehearsal period a composition on them, and then we perform it, either at the opening, closing of the show. This is a specific variation, it's variation 25. That's what I call a shapeshifter. So it's one string going through the back and coming out and hooking up to the tuner, and so you can change its shape while it's on display by changing as you do so, the pitch of the string changes, so you can play different notes. This body of work is called Transition. It's essentially guitar amplifiers that I take apart. I take all the circuit board that runs inside of them, using the wires that's already there as my palette for these kind of architectural, like sculptural paintings, or if you may. And so what you see here is basically the wires that already run through the circuit board are used as a palette for these works, and all the knobs are the knobs that pre-existed in the amplifier, and so in a way everything that's here is just things that were in the amplifier already, and so in a way the system is kind of going through the outside and creating these compositions. At the same time, these works are completely functional still. So you can hook them to something and like flip them on, and you can play or sing through them, or output like another piece that has sonic capabilities through them. In the later ones, I also incorporated the actual fabric from the amplifier. So this is a Fender amplifier, a Vox amplifier. And for me, it's kind of this kind of relates to propagation opus 3, where the system that runs inside is outside and is shown and is exposed. This work is called Barricade. It is what you see. It's a form made out of microphones. This specific one is a triangle. Each one of the sides of the triangle outputs the sound in another location. So it depends on the show. But I have a series of shows called Transitions. And in those shows, I show the works on felt, the transition canvases, and the barricade works together. And when I do so, the barricade works are hooked up to the transition canvases, meaning when somebody's inside this highly performative space and sings to one side, it's coming out of a transition canvas. And then when they move, they do the slightest move with their head and sing to the other side, it's coming out of another transition canvas. So there's kind of like an architectural expansion that happens through the slightest move of inside this very performative space. And I kind of think about the space inside this form as being like a sound void in a way, that anything that happens there is kind of outputted and taken and outputted somewhere else. But also thinking about the enablers of sound. You know, sound, our voice is one of our most important ways to express ourselves and to object. And thinking about it in relation to this and the idea of barricades, something that is restrictive while still liberating, is like this kind of like very subtle dance between the two. And of course, the cables running on the floor, creating this kind of pattern. I'm going to show you a segment from, since 2016 till this day, I do exhibitions that are called Transitions of these three bodies of work, different variations of these works, new ones, always working together. I'm going to show you a segment from a performance we wrote on them. Specifically, it's from 2016. In this exhibition space, the three works, one space it was a gallery with 3 rooms. One space had only works on felt. One space had only transition works, and then one space had the standalone barricade, meaning when someone was singing inside a barricade, it was coming out of these transition works that were in another space. So there was kind of like, you had to kind of like choose as an audience if you're going to see the performance and hear it acoustically, or you're going to go and hear it coming out of these works. So there's kind of like, again, this idea of the democratic viewing experience. And I should say that the works are always composed collaboratively. Through a set of rehearsals. It's never my performance, it's always our performance. And the musicians that take part are to blame as much as me. I think we're running out of time, so I'm going to finish with this project. It's called Melodies of Certain Damage, and it's a body of work that I started in 2018. It's ongoing. With this work, I buy guitars that I always wanted to own and never could afford, and I break them in my studio alone. And the way they break, I map it out. So every time the work is installed, it's installed exactly the way it broke. And so the chance factor of the break is kind of recorded into the work. In the studio, after I break it, I screw them down to the floor, and then I put new sets of strings onto them. Piano string, guitar strings, moving them, no longer guitars, right? They're kind of breaks, moving them into a new working order as an instrument. They're no longer an object that you hold. They're a place, more so, on the floor. Each work in relation to the way it broke, one can be 14 feet long, and another could be really centered and closed. But they have a very varied sets of strings and notes that can be can be activated. These works, like the felts, like the propagation of a street, the barricade, they're interactive. They're always on. The viewers can interact with them. When you do so, you do have to kneel to the floor. You do have to conform to them, insert your body into them. And that's part of the work and part of your decision to do so. And with these works too, when they're shown, you know, I think about it as like a landscape of debris, you know. And the works start really, for me, after the break. So it's after this kind of cliche moment of breaking a guitar. It's left with the debris, and what do you do with it? And how do you generate something that is new and optimistic in a way, a sort of like a suggestion to moving forward after a break, after something is lost, after a violent act. With these works, like the felts, barricade transitions, composition, I work with local musicians, and we write compositions on these works, completely instrumental, and we perform them. And I have a segment that we will finish with of a performance we did in 2018. The latest iteration was September 2022. This is from the Wadsworth Museum in Connecticut. But this is from Israel. That's a wrap. Sure. I don't know if do we do questions if there are any. Happy to answer. Yes.
I really enjoy how from the get-go you were investigating our relationship with the floor and all of what that means by putting it on the wall, by bringing it closer to it, getting rid of it, and pushing it somewhere else, and elevating it. I'm wondering if you could speak more about that sort of instability that you feel, or stability that you're trying to achieve, or maybe destabilizing.
Well, I think the floor is interesting in a way for me, first of all, as a woman. I think it's something we take for granted, obviously, but it's the very foundation we stand on. And I think in order to start thinking of a new way of existing and a new way of thinking, we have to start moving it and deconstructing it. And so this is, in hindsight, so we do so many things instinctively as artists, and then we look back and we're like, oh, the floor. But I think in hindsight, through the years, that is what I've been trying to do, is rethink the very foundation I work and stand on. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Even though you work with like really deconstructed instruments, almost all of your work seems to have this very sort of clear melody, sort of recognizable in a way as like pop or rock music. Why do you sort of want to evoke or play sort of pop melodies?
Yeah, I should say that, for example, Melodies of Certain Damage is completely instrumental, and it's a 30-minute pieces usually, but it's true. And for me, it's interesting because, with sound art, which I'm not sure how I fall within that rubric, so often we have expectations of how it's going to sound and how it's going to be, challenging or noise-oriented, and I never like to meet expectations. Yeah. So. Yes.
How was your more sound-based work received at the beginning? Did you find it difficult to forge space for it, or was it received well right from the beginning?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I started my first composition piece, which was 2006, composition 24. It was in Israel, and I remember at the time it was written up by a critic that was the main critic at the time, writing about art in Israel, kind of dismissing it as cute, but not art. And I think it depends on context and where you are and the time, but it's becoming easier and easier. And definitely, it was before it was in fashion. And I think there is a real receptiveness to different sensorial experiences within, the viewing experience, and having art be more than the visual. For me, there's something with sound also that's just like, is a violent tool almost, because, to not see something, you just need to close your eyes. Sound is something that, people fight against all the time to block and keep out. It's really hard. It's something that vibrates through our body, that moves our very cells. And with that in mind, I think it's an extremely powerful tool for communication. And so that doesn't answer your question, but I think it's impossible to overlook it. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's a great, wet question. So there's a lot of solitude in the studio. It's a very specific space where you're in front of your own thoughts and fears and your own mechanisms. So for sure, for me, coming together afterwards with musicians and giving up also control of the final product, or the end result. I don't like the word product; it's weird, but the end result is both liberating and scary, But also, my first love is music. I grew up loving music so much, and I got introduced into art afterwards. So I would say that my second love is art, but maybe the stronger one. But I grew up playing in my room with an acoustic guitar and singing, and I never thought it was very successful. I didn't find my voice through that, and I think for me, within my practice, I am grateful that I'm able to come together with these really talented musicians and create music in a way that I would never be able to create alone. So kind of like a 180 degree, or like 360 more so, like coming back to kind of like this child in their bedroom kind of playing and thinking about, outputting sound and songs into the world, and not being able to because various reasons, and then through the art and through the collaboration, I'm able to fulfill that desire for so there's both kind of breaking the solitude of the studio, but also just a selfish kind of being excited about music and bringing that back into the practice through other people, with other people. Yeah. Yeah.
In the first pieces throughout your presentation, a lot of them had a lot of black and almost absence of color through the gaffer tape and the shelving and the alcohol bottles and the flooring of the non-traction flooring from the bars.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a reason that you gravitated towards the color black or the absence of color in black when creating these pieces?
Yeah, I think the color is inherent to the material. And I think it's inherent to the material because it's meant to fit in and disappear. And so the blackness is there as almost like an invisible color, even though it's the most dense, right? And so my reasoning for black is really kind of conceptual by using the materials themselves. But also with the performance, I never tell the performers what to wear. But I always ask them to wear black. We all wear black, and each one with their own style and their own choices. It's because I think black is a leveler. It's a color that you can wear if you're going to a black tie event, or if you're the server at the black tie event. That's kind of it's an interesting color. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I knew of the space before because I was given the floor plan, and I knew of the, almost cathedral-like ceilings it had, the tallness of it, and I thought it would be a great place to do a work that resonates through the space, through a set of speakers, and kind of vibrates the whole space. So yeah, in a way I did think, of course I thought about it before, with every one of these projects, and especially a project like the one in El Salvador, Propagation Opus 3. There's an architect involved. There's so much planning. So the idea of spontaneity is really non-existent. You have to really work with the space. And I feel a lot of my work are space specific in that sense, and really react to the space that they're in. Yeah. Great. Well, thank you.